So now we have here an illustrious group of guests representing all the different parties which are needed to have successful PPP models. We have the financing sector, we have the project developers, we have the civil society, and we have the government. Yesterday we heard we need the government. This is the main partner because government has to set the rules, and government has to have a visionary approach. And I would like to start with a representative of our host country. Mr. Tahir Diab is the Senior Director of the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy. Please, if you could introduce you quickly and then your vision about sustainable infrastructure.
Good morning, everybody. I think our model speaks for itself when it comes to how we incentivize the market towards partnership and collaboration. The whole idea started 5 years ago, I think, about really putting together a structured approach towards sustainability and especially energy management. We came up with a clear vision, which is stipulated in the Dubai Integrated Energy Strategy, supported that by a work plan and a roadmap. We started some of the programs and some of the projects, and having delivered some of these already in the last 4 years, we're even now looking at what we have done so far and trying to refine and readjust based on some of the market dynamics that have changed. But to start off, it's a very clear vision by the government, and actually was sponsored by the government. Dynamic leadership has always been the motto here in the UAE, and I think some of you might agree with that strongly. We made sure that the regulatory framework exists. We benchmarked, we looked at what's happening somewhere else in the region and also on the global level. We picked and customized a system that really fits well for Dubai, and we moved forward. And we always make sure that we engage with the different stakeholders, be it the financing or project developers, the technology providers, and even the government entities. We feel content and comfortable with what we have done. I think the evidence was the last project that you heard about, which is an IPP model again. The lowest levelized cost of energy for the 200 megawatt solar projects, and there are more that are coming along as well in the next few years. So I believe it's the vision of the government, the regulatory framework, and driving that through a very structured approach that helps in moving it forward.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to turn to European vision on project development, and here I would like to invite Christian Müller, who has experience in developing such initiatives from the scratch and to implementation, be it in Denmark itself, be it also in partner countries like the Ukraine. Please, Christian, if you could develop a little bit.
Yeah. My name is Carsten, but that's okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this session. I come from a company called Clean. It's a clean tech cluster in Denmark. We are doing a lot of work with innovation within the whole clean tech area. We are 44 people sitting, working with these activities, and and we are working very closely in what we call a triple helix. So we work with science, we work with the public, and with the private companies in order to make solutions, so to speak. My part of this is International Director for projects, and it's project development, it's partnerships, and it's financing that we are looking at when we go abroad. We mainly are here to support Danish companies on the more difficult export markets. They can do themselves within Europe, so my knowledge is mainly from Asia and Eastern Europe, not so much from here in this area. But I would like to come up with some practical issues that we have experienced and where we see there are some things that could be better, at least, and also some changes that have to be done. In our mind, public-private partnership is a precondition for succeeding in many ways, but also including more than we have been used to, also including the NGOs in the process in a proper way. But I would also say that what happens now is that we see people moving from the countryside to the cities. I read that it was more than 1.5 million people every week that were moving from the countryside to the cities. 5 billion people will be living in cities from 2020, that's 5 years, nearly tomorrow. And we have a lot of tasks to do, so we have to get this process running much faster in the future. What we see is that all the customers, all the problem owners are looking for solutions. And in my mind, all the companies, not only in Denmark, but around the world, have to be part of a kind of paradigm shift, because they have to go from selling products also to selling real solutions. And that have to create a new way of thinking in many companies. I think co-creation between problem owners and solution providers is essential for the process. I also see a problem about the procurement processes and the financing and the tender procedures. It's very costly to do this public-private partnership, to involve the NGOs in the process, and it's a long process, and nobody really wants to invest in that. That's one problem we have. The second problem is that when we often have finished with a good solution, it's sent out in a tender, and sometimes it's the cheapest bidder that wins, not looking at the lifetime cost, where a project with the right technologies might be much cheaper in the end. That was a lot of words, sorry.
Thank you, Carsten. But I would like first to then hand over to Hanna Zoglou, who is from the region. So just to see whether your vision is the same as the region's vision is. What do you think about what has been shown right now by Carsten?
Well, the partnership between the public and the private sector is extremely important. And in Jordan, we have several examples, but I can go back to the year 2000 when I used to work in the information technology sector at that time. And we launched what we call the REACH initiative for the information technology. At that time, we didn't have an IT sector to start with. And then we approached the government, and one of the main goals is to try to draw a framework, a legal framework for these technology companies, how to collaborate and operate in Jordan in that. That REACH initiative, then we created a business association called INTAJ that took the initiative and moved on. Today, the ICT sector contributes between 8 to 12% of the GDP of Jordan. We have over 30,000 jobs that were created because of that. In 2009, when I moved into the energy sector, we seek the same thing actually, and we started what we call IDAMA as an association for the business. We didn't have an energy sector per se. We only had the government, and we have the privatization that happened along the way. From 2009 till today we have over 600 companies working in the solar PV in Jordan, creating so many jobs. And we have achieved, the government signed 12 PPAs for solar PV projects, and then there are also wind projects. And that wouldn't have happened without the collaboration between the private and public sector, especially in the private sector guiding the government in terms of the legal frameworks and conditions that will permit such growth in that. So probably I do subscribe to that. These are two examples, life examples, Jordan.
So the government was kind of regulatory authority and also incubator for new
Exactly,
industrial
and the
development.
regulation came out actually out of the, discussion with the government from the private sector. Normally what you see is the private sector is moving much faster than the government, and they try to do things, and the government, they are at a very, very slower pace, and so they get hit not finding the regulations that will permit them to do the things that they want to do at the time that they wanted to do. So, and that's the challenge that we see most of the time.
Just if you allow the government's role, you say it takes quite a long time. Yes, it's my experience too. But in your case here, it was a different evolution, or what? How do you assess the situation?
I think you have to look at the fundamentals of the Dubai setup. We are a net importer of energy, so for us to really move forward was a mandate. It wasn't an option. And we couldn't rely on the private sector to drive a lot of these projects. So we had to basically provide the seeding or the foundation, which is, as I mentioned, the announcement of projects, the regulatory framework, and making sure that people understand that Dubai is serious about what they want to do. Another really crucial element that I'd like to point out here, and maybe a lot of people don't know, is the cost of energy here to the consumer in Dubai is not subsidized, except a small portion for the nationals looked at as a social benefit. So when you go and float an IPP in the market and decide that you want investors to come in, and you're basically not providing subsidy, that is an attractive proposition to the private companies, which is something is not the case in some other countries here. So that was also a driving factor that our cost of energy is basically covered and passed on to the consumer. And the idea was to really get the consumer to be as well partner in this, meaning, their consumer, their behavior, the way they consume the energy is felt by them, from a financial point of view. But I think also we have a number of initiatives that this event is one of them. We also have the Dubai Green Economy Partnership. So it's a group of people representing the free zones, the financial centers, some of the entities in the energy sectors. And this group has a plan to go out in different areas throughout the world and spread the message about Dubai wants partnership to pursue their green economy vision. And I think, we're happy with what we're seeing, especially when it comes to some of the projects that we have closed already as far as tendering the solar megawatt. As you know, we've received huge interest globally, not just regionally. The price was competitive. We wanted to also share the risk. That's one thing about solar. We took the example by leading. So we did the 13 megawatt contributions from different entities in the Dubai government, and then we have it up and running. Now the next 200 was felt, let's bring in, and that's, you talk about creating the market, the opportunities for employment, bring in the technology. There are companies in Dubai now that actually assemble solar power plants, and there's so many of them. We really see that Dubai can be also a hub for solar panel manufacturing, or all the solar technologies are involved, whether it's inverters or structures or frames of this nature. So I think, for our case, the vision was clear. This decision was fast, and that's what it matters. You can always bring ideas and proposals to the government, but in our case, I think we owe it to them. The speed of execution, it really would make a difference here.
Okay, that's an important lesson then to learn also for others. Now, one thing is speed, one thing is government, one thing is technology, one thing is the whole setup of such a PPP. But what is very important also, if we take up the notion of sharing risk, is also sharing potential risks in sustainability, society, and environment. So I would like to hear from Ida Tilic about her experience as representative of a civil society organization, how she interprets the situation.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. And thank you for having me on this panel. So my name is Ida, and I'm working at Emirates Wildlife Society. We are representing WWF in the GCC region. And for those of you who are not familiar with WWF, it's a global conservation organization working pretty much across the world. And the NGO sector as such is sometimes referred to as the third sector, because we're not the government. At the same time, we're non-profit. So we're really here with a mission, and EWS, WWF's mission, as we're called here, is very much about climate. We're really here to conserve biodiversity and tackle climate change. So this is very much the angle that I'm coming from here today. So I think we all go to these conferences to be inspired by the speakers and the participants. And yesterday, the gentleman, Nicolas Hulot, was talking a bit about the opportunity of climate change. And I thought that was quite interesting. That climate change and indeed the road towards a more sustainable future is really an opportunity for everyone to come together. And it's very important also if we want to stay below these 2 degrees warming that we also heard yesterday could bring us into what is very serious and irreversible climate change. So it's important with these partnerships and collaborative approach. At the same time, science is telling us that this is an urgent matter. There's a lot of carbon emission going into the atmosphere, and we've heard a lot about it. But we also know that that's what's causing climate change. As long as we keep putting carbon dioxide emission into the atmosphere, we cannot really talk about sustainable progress. We really need to get to a point where the emissions are lower than what they are today. So we, of course, believe that achieving a sustainable progress through economy is possible, but it's only with a collective approach, which means sort of shared vision, as well as support from all the sectors of society. At EWS, WWF, we very much believe and depend on this collaborative approach. As an organization which we really have our goal is to mobilize society, because we cannot do these things ourselves. We need society to be mobilized and to help us conserve the planet, not just for the species on it, but very much for the future generations. And here locally we work in that manner. We work with the government to look at having an impact on the ecological footprint through research and through legislation and through putting in place standards and policies. We also work in Fujairah with the government there to establish the UAE's first national park, which is a very different project. And that's very much a private-public sector approach, where the private sector is coming in with their abilities and competencies, as well as we have our competencies there. And of course, the key player there is the government that has had the land, which is going to be the first protected area, the first national park be a protected area. So it's a very big achievement already, but still a lot of work to do there.
And if you allow, just to add an additional question or a remark to what you have said. I mean, we have talked or heard a lot about the challenges, the destruction of ecosystems and so on and so forth, but you can also cite an example where even ecosystems have been built up thanks to human interference, and where you can now develop even sanctuaries or so. Could you just mention
Sure,
this?
but I think
it's important to show also opportunities, concrete opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is, again, a very important part of a green economy, that there are places like this. At the same time, it's, of course, from WWF's perspective, also about conserving rare species. And this particular place is a place with very sort of prominent water resource, which is rare in this arid region. So you actually even have a waterfall in Wadi Raya in Fujairah.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I would like to go to the financing sector, because at the end everything has to be financed. And I would like to turn to Ben Cotton, who is representing Earth Capital Partners investing in such ventures. And I wonder, would you be interested in kind of teaming up with these partners sitting here?
Most certainly. We are a for-profit organisation, as you said. It's quite unusual to find myself agreeing with all panelists, so it's a novel experience. Thank you. Earth Capital Partners is an investor that invests capital into projects that we define as sustainable. And they have to be sustainable from a financial perspective. Our first job is to protect our investors and ensure that they achieve a proper risk-adjusted return for the capital that they're providing into projects. But for us, and what makes us unique almost, is that it also has to be sustainable from an environmental perspective and from a social perspective. Now, the conventional custodians of environment and social issues are governments. So whilst we, on the face of it, we're investors into renewable energy, and that's actually building renewable energy projects, into energy efficiency, either new build or retrofit. But we also do sustainable agriculture. We are just launching a fund that will invest into companies that have intellectual property in the space. And we're also moving into logistics now. Now, those would traditionally sound like the sort of things that were unlikely to create agreement across 5 white chairs on a panel. But in practical terms, in all of those sectors, we're actually doing what could be and is described as public-private. It's very hard for us to do what we have to do without very close collaboration with the government. And I think that this event needs to be complimented for being held in Dubai, because I think what you've done in terms of your PP process is taken PPP onto the next stage. You've recognized some of the issues that are faced. PPP is a fantastic way of financing projects. It's a great method for price discovery. It's a great way to create transparency about acquisition process, execution, and decisions about whole life versus capital cost. And Dubai has taken that process to the next stage. There's a lot of conventional PPP that's been done out there. I've worked on some of the early PPP deals quite a long time ago. I don't want to admit how long ago. But for ECP, our job in working with our investors is actually to get capital on the ground as fast as possible, whilst making sure that we work around risks. And therefore, for us, entering a conventional PPP process that is driven through an RFP process and an 18-month, 3-year price discovery process is not something we can do. That costs us, or costs our investors, a lot of money, and there's no certainty on the outcome. So what we've done is we've created some new different versions of PPP, which I'm quite happy to run through, but effectively there are ways in which we can meet the objectives of the relevant government and obviously comply with all local laws, but still get investors' money into projects with a proper return, both in a financial perspective, but also the social and environmental return that the governments are demanding that we meet.
So thank you very much. So in other terms, you can prove that actually the financial sector has an appetite in such ventures, but has a maybe a little bit different shaped appetite than what authorities, civil societies, technology providers, and so think, or how do you assess this?
No, I think it's quite integrated. I don't think we should be, yes, I'm the finance representative here, but what we do is not typical. You have the big banks and the big EPC contractors who operate a PPP model, and their business is to spend $500,000 to prepare for an RFP process. That's their job, that's their business. We don't seek to compete with those guys. What we do is to find solutions. We're a solutions provider, and that only really happens in about 10% of all cases. So whilst that's a massive business for us, it keeps us occupied, very busy. I wouldn't claim that we're the norm. All we're doing is creating new models using old tools to deliver solutions to people who can work with the way that our investors need to work. And also with our constraints are quite demanding. I mean, we're closer to WWF than to DOE in America in terms of what we demand for our social and environmental return. So I can't claim that we're typical. What we're doing is innovating on the edge, whilst the mainstream stuff continues and is a massively effective way to get large-scale projects done.
Thank you very much. So now, for the more mainstream actors then, how could we there improve the situation, taking into consideration that it is important to have a vision of a multi-stakeholder approach, to include right from the beginning the different stakeholders' views, so to set a solid basis then for the future and for a strong and accepted venture at the end. So what are your recommendations in order to improve this situation? Maybe Carsten and then Ida.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, please.
Well, I think just sort of on a broad perspective, and then later on maybe a more local perspective on such partnerships, I think one of the challenges is a lot of times there is actually a common vision, but maybe the roadmap is not 100% clear, and some of these private public partnerships becomes more of sort of supplier-buyer relationships. So I think it's very important also to emphasize the word partnership here, that a partnership really needs to be a proper partnership. It takes two to tango, and I think it's important that that's sort of the spirit that people are going into when they talk about these kind of partnerships. Of course, there needs to be a very clear definition of roles and responsibilities, but it's important that the different stakeholders are sitting around the table and then discussing things, also if there are challenges that, you know, again, you bring the stakeholders around the table and solve the problem together. The second thing, which is more of a local perspective, and I see sometimes, so some of, if we look at WWF, some of the very successful partnerships and private-public partnerships as well, a lot of them are actually quite long-term. So, for example, we've been working with a big cement manufacturer called Lafarge, which was a very unlikely relationship. Why on earth would WWF ever go into such a partnership? But the partnership came in with sort of the demand of a 20% reduction on emission over 10 years, and it was achieved after, I think, 8 or 9 years. Sometimes locally, the timeline is very short, which is something that I think we find quite a lot, that if you come with a suggestion of a 10-year sort of partnership, and I think, you know, it's the speed here, which is really a good thing. I think we really appreciate it, and progress is of course important, and also, as I said in the beginning, it's urgent, but sometimes things take a little bit more time, and one of the things that we also sometimes are seeing here in the public-private partnership is that corners are cut because of very short timelines.
Yeah. Carsten and then Hannah.
My experience is not from this area, and I have a lot of experience for countries where they are really lacking finance. And I would say it's quite different problems they are facing. They need guys like you that can really go into and be sharing these responsibilities and also some of the risks that have to be taken, and maybe do it in combination with donors that are able to get into some funding of these projects. We actually see a lot of these projects taking so long time in countries where there lack of finance, that the PPP doesn't really work, and somehow we have to help this process, and somebody have to be part in supporting such a process, and that is the financial guys somehow that should be part of that process.
Wouldn't it be interesting to team up with experienced and successful partners?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So would you be then interested in venturing into such tripartite dialogues?
I think, you know, we speak about the difficulties and the challenges, but remember there are building blocks that needs to come together. So it's really at the end of the day, it's a business case. I mean, the financier and the banker want to make money out of it. So you need to build it with planning first. I mean, you really need to plan for what you want to do and time it and bring in some elements that is going to make it happen. So, for example, we said about Dubai, opening up the market here where it's no longer a sole company that provides utilities. The law was changed and it was signed by the ruler saying you can come in, you can actually own part of a utility plant, and you can partner with the, so that was the first initiative. Then we also changed things related to the IPP. So you can have stakeholders, a stakeholder in that project. We came up with a model. There are a number of models. So, for example, even on the energy service contracting, which is another element also to look at all the buildings in Dubai for retrofitting. That is pretty much a PPP because you came up with a model that looks at guaranteed savings and then shared savings. I mean, the shared savings is all about the private company coming in, rehabilitate certain buildings, guarantee certain performance and savings, and then you are being paid back from the savings rather than from the building owner. Okay, and this is something we've started also about 1.5 years ago. So I think there are elements that needs to come together, but at the end of the day, it needs to make a financial business case to the bank. The bank that is financing the 200 megawatt happens to be a local bank. And the opportunity that you mentioned about the liquidity, yes, it was a great time because everybody wants to use that money somewhere. So the chance was also great for us, meaning there is a lot of liquidity. The banks want it to work, and that's where you also can support the local bank in really creating more business for them.
Anna, if you would like to add.
Yeah. In fact, a good example that's just talked about, which is the solar projects in Jordan. It would not have happened without the support of the government, signing a PPA for 20 years. But over and above, we got a government guarantee that in case that the off-taker is to default, the government's going to be end up paying for that. And that really attracted all the lenders, such as IFC, EPRD, OPEC, EIP, and even in our case for building the 52 mega, we attracted the Japanese lenders, JPIC, Mizuho, and Nexi. And that wouldn't really happen without the support of the government. And the government really was flexible. We had to amend so many things in the PPA, Power Purchase Agreement, in order to achieve what the lenders are requiring. The same thing we did that with the government guarantee, and they're happy. And now 12 projects going to be on. They all signed the financial close document, and towards the end of May, they will start the first drawdown out of that. And we're talking about an investment of around $600 million that we were able to bring. And this is due to the collaboration between the private and public sector in that sense.
So there needs flexibility, pragmatism, but also what? Wisdom.
Wisdom. But what's really important is that you need to have that trust between the private and public sector. But what is also important is to align the expectation, okay, between the two sectors.
Or all included.
Yeah. So so as for them to work together, and you have to start at an early stage.
Yeah.
You cannot just jump into it. You need to prepare that. And we've been working with the government since 2008 or 2009. We were partners with them in issuing the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Law. All the legal frameworks within that, we contributed to that. In fact, we were invited, we sat with them, and we discussed the law in order how to build this sector.
So, thank you very much. So I would like now to open the discussion to the floor and to the public, and I invite you to be very brief, precise, and just address some questions so that most people can address.
Ali has been dying to ask a question, and here he is, starting early. So Ali, here you go. Good man.
Does anyone or any other companies support you or encourage you to go through this project and any other green projects?
I think, Ida, he was asking when you had said you had a cooperation with Lafarge. He's wondering what other kind of companies support the great work that you're doing. That's what he was asking, the big companies.
Sure. So no, I think again, as an organization, we are very dependent on partnerships. Again, as a non-profit and NGO, there's not much you can do by yourself, and I definitely, as WWF, one of our unique perspectives is that we work very closely with the private sector, because we believe that the private sector can bring solutions. Yeah.
So Ali, there's lots of companies that she's working with. Every day she's chasing companies to make sure they get them. Saeed has a question here. Let them know who you are, Saeed.
Yeah, Saeed with the United Nations here in Abu Dhabi, Emirates. I mean, there's a lot of great work being done, you know, and I highly value the work of private sector in companies. Here I'm being a little bit harsh in my question. It seems from the last 2 days and other things that the private sector, the investors wants to have in a way a free ride, you know, in terms of passing the risk, whether you want the government to take the risk. As I said, I'm being a bit harsh, you know, maybe that's not the reality. But what is happening in this new model of sort of green in sort of calculating the risk, because it's not a conventional PPP, it's not conventional investment, because there are it is not true that investors just want to make money. I don't think that is true, because there's investors also have other noble goals. You know, a lot of investors give their money, billions, to very, very noble causes. So what is happening in this area in innovation in order to convince, you know, the motive, in addition to profit, maximizing profit, you know, to calculate, to factor in the risk, other motives of social goods and others?
For the private sector, I have never seen a free ride, frankly. Been in business for over 30 years, and we bleed more than we have a free ride. But the collaboration between the two sectors is extremely important in that the private sector is after profit at the end of the day, because if you don't have profit, you cannot re-inject back the money into the system, and you know, you go into that. But I'll give you an example. Like, we were able to bring the Japanese lenders because they have an interest in that. And one of the interests was that this is a green project, and for them it's very important to put their money in a green project. So that's why they were interested. Although in Jordan we're living in an area where all the countries around us are really, you know, boiling, it's very hard to invest. But with these solutions or these projects, we have all the international lenders coming into Jordan, and they wanted to invest and to support. It's not just the money itself that you're going to make at the end of the day, but also there is another value that others will look at and they want to cultivate out of these projects.
A brief comment. Just a brief comment.
I think also we have to think about when we talk about PPP, it's the requirements definition. I think if it's defined well, the terms are clear. I think it's a win-win situation normally, because if you are going to float a tender, you're going to have to make sure that you can attract the bidders. So I do emphasize that if there is a business case and the terms and conditions are attractive, financial, technical, and the risk management aspect is also built in with it, it would provide normally a good project. And anyway, this is a mandate for this PPP to work, in my views.
The last
It was actually some of the same things I would say. I believe that we, during the last 5-6 years, have seen that the institutional investors are getting more and more to sustainable green environmental projects, and they have this new way of thinking, but they still want a return of investment of in their mind, a reasonable size, and that always creates some problems. But they are thinking in a positive way today, and I think that's really have been a shift we have seen during the last few years.
very good. So that's okay.
Can I just come with one comment on that? So yeah,
This seems to be a very
sorry, it's a very good
challenging
question. But I think also just to bring in sort of the role of NGOs here. So I definitely agree with sort of if you are taking a risk, you also need a gain. But sometimes also this is where the NGOs can come in with some sort of independent opinion about it and give advice to the partnership.
I'm from India. My name is Dr. I.S. Konthaujam. Actually, I would like to get some more suggestions in regard to the maximum or minimum role of civil societies in PPP, especially in green economy.
Sorry, I didn't. Could you just repeat the
Role
last bit?
role of the civil societies.
The role
in,
of the civil society.
Yeah.
Sure.
Please explain me more.
Great. Yes. At EWS, WWF, again, civil society is a very big sector. So I can only speak for how we work in public-private partnerships. But the example I mentioned before, where we come in and we are part of the partnership for an independent view, sometimes our skills and expertise are needed in such partnerships. There are also times where we actually facilitate the partnerships, such as our ecological footprint initiative down here, which is very much driven by the government. But we have come in and facilitated certain things. For example, last year we had a lighting standard approved here in the UAE on indoor lighting. And while of course it's the government that needs to form the legislation, our role was very much to conduct the research and look at best practices internationally. And another thing we did there was that we brought in the lighting industry. And that was actually quite interesting, because the lighting standard is not just about a standard. There's a whole ecosystem of recycling of light bulbs. When we start bringing in new lighting, you actually have new issues and new problems that needs to be solved. And it was a very collaborative approach, and we have done a lot of consulting, and that was very much our role to sort of facilitate this and bring in best practice internationally. And at the end of the day, it was of course the government that put the legislation together and issued the decree.
So once again, multi-stakeholder approaches seem to be the fruit for the future solutions. So,
good morning, sorry. Every company wants to get profit, right? But what is really your goal? Like, what are you really running after?
okay, maybe from government side?
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about the private business or the private sector, and we think of the government sector as well, or the public, at the end of the day, yes, they do look at their, bottom line and how much profit they're making. Now, the goal of any government, if they want to really, let's say, drive this partnership, is to look after the private sector. So you bring in the regulations that protect their interest, the laws that protect their interests. Arbitration rules sometimes is required. That's why we have, for example, DFC arbitration, where if a national company come in and invest money, they do have the right to contest if needed, right? But it goes back again to the terms of that contract. And normally a lot of these companies, whether they're international or private, they have their own law firms that looks at the terms and conditions and make sure it does make sense. So for us, it's really looking after the private sector. It's not just, government wanting to drive these projects and just look after their interests. And I think there is a balance, and there should be a balance in these projects. And then it's the government that needs to drive that interest and make sure that they are protected in all aspects, and then at the end of the day deliver the projects and the desired results.
So now the last question, Edna.
Hi, good morning. Dr. Munir Majdalawiya from Zayed University. Sorry, probably I addressed this earlier, but the partnership is very important. I know you talked about the private and the public partnership in regard to buying and selling. There is a lot of emphasis in the country here to start establishing partnership with the universities, especially when it comes to research and development. And my question to you, because I know most of the headquarters for most of the companies outside the region here, what kind of programs you have to encourage universities to start engaging on this partnership, to start introducing some of the research here? Thank you.
We do look at the education institutions as part of this partnership model, by the way, and we do have collaboration, engagement with different ones locally here. We have some also international, where we send some of the students or the graduates or even some of the fresh employees for some of the government entities that is under the umbrella of the Supreme Council of Energy, and we send them abroad, and sometimes we send them locally. There is also collaboration, for example, with Masdar Institute. We in Dubai, we have a lot of programs that we work on. For example, we had, and we still do, establishment of wind and solar atlas, which is basically about measuring the level of radiation in the UAE, covering Dubai as well, to see what is the potential and really what is, because a lot of people think if you have sun, then solar is workable, and that is not the case. There are some countries that are more leveraged in their radiation level than us. For example, when we look at Morocco, Jordan, their environment is much better than ours. But still, we do have the technical element that makes it happen. You know, there are lots of universities. We engage. We have a number of programs to promote that. I think the Emirates Energy Award is one mechanism that we engage and hear a lot about some of the research and the developments that take place in the MENA region, not just the UAE. I can tell you in 2013, which was the first cycle for the EEA, we were really impressed with the level of research and development and some of the pilot programs that exist in the countries here. You know, you talk about Morocco, Jordan, Egypt. It was astonishing. And we're talking about research and development, not just based on thesis. We're talking about pilot. I can recall University of Bahrain, 4 students working on hydrogen fuel cell car, how they improved the performance of it and made it actually work with less hydrogen. So, you know, we engage, we spread the message. If it happens that maybe when we're not engaged with your particular university, you know, the door is open and there are many venues. One of them is this today to really seek that collaboration.
Just a last word, Hannah?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, actually, when you build such projects, they need to be sustainable, and they are for 20 years projects. So there has to be some type of contribution out of these projects into the local community, whether CSR, and also to the local, you know, education institution. In our project in Amman, it's a city to the north of Amman, to the south of Amman, and it's a very poor city. So out of these projects we create jobs, but what's more importantly, we've been engaging with Hussein bin Talal University there, and we have established an evaluation field for solar PV and CPV, and they have access to that to take all the measurements and the readings and to work on real you know, products, solar products there. In addition, we have collaborated with the Vocational Training Center, and we established a center for vocational training also. That's in Ma'an city down the south. So you need to look at these projects in this type of perspective. It's not just one project you do. You're going to be staying in that project for 20 years. So there has to be some type of contribution, and there has to be some additional benefits, not just of selling electricity only. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So additional benefits, I would say co-benefits, I would say partnerships, long-term vision. These are the fundamental elements to create sustainable partnerships and PPP. New models, as we have heard, including the financial sector. But what is very striking to us, I think, and what we should take away is that in the future we will have to build upon open partnerships, transparency, so that we can adopt and incorporate new ideas, innovations, and let all the parties participate at such ventures. So thank you very much. Now I would like to invite everybody for the lunch, which is taking place right now, and at 45, sorry, the next session will take place in the plenary room again. Thank you very much.
Super, thank you so much, and a huge thanks to all the panel, and of course, a huge thanks to Hans-Peter Egler. He is the CEO of the Global Infrastructure from Basel. So thank you so much for doing that panel. It was well done, well coordinated for us all. Now, as Hans-Peter was just saying, this afternoon, let me quickly run through it for you. We have at 12:45, Youth and Behavioral Change to Combat Climate Change. And I can promise you, this is going to be a fabulous session. We have a wonderful lady here from Abu Dhabi, one of the young, inspiring social media girls, Abahul Al-Mahdi, who's going to head up that session. And Dubai, Abahul, another youth ambassador here in the region, is going to be there. We have the social media manager from Maersk Shipping Lines. We have, of course, DIWA and the Supreme Council representation. So it's really going to be a rocking panel. And we've even warned Waleed Salman, too, that he has to be ready with full of energy for that panel. So please be back on time. That is starting at 12:45. Then we have Smart Cities this afternoon. And then, of course, our closing plenary at 3 o'clock, which will be so all in the other room, and then, of course, back in the big room where, of course, His Excellency Syed Mohammed Al Tayar will be back with us for that closing session. So please be sure and stay with us for the afternoon. Lunch again upstairs in the Bubble Lounge, and we also have our PPP sessions, the more informal sessions that are going on out there. So once again, for our wonderful panel here on the public-private partnership, risks, rewards, and of course the solutions, some of which they gave us, and leaving us with a great optimism for the afternoon. And to Hans-Peter, once again, thank you all so much. And thank you, our audience.